Hi, I'm Mark, producer of Roundtable, the TV series born here in New York City at the legendary Manhattan Neighborhood Network Studios. The exchange of ideas is important, and that is why we bring to you the following presentation. Please watch.
Good evening, and welcome to Single Shot Show at Manhattan Neighborhood Network's Roundtable. Tonight, our episode, in a way, is an emergency meeting. We all heard about the notorious banana and the duct tape, and it really created unexpectedly a large splash and very negative splash in art community. And that made us to want yet again discuss at a larger scale what art is, what makes art an art piece, and how is it different from everything else, and what are the main properties of it. And we invited to discuss it our firm friend, Michael Colavito. Hello, Michael. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So let's talk about art. What makes art to be art?
Great. Happy New Year, by the way.
Happy New Year to you.
For me, that exhibition that you just spoke about actually served itself in a positive way, because I received a number of phone calls from people in the industry, very, high-end people, who were really, really upset about it, and said, with me in mind, which I was touched by, that, they know how hard I work and what I've done my whole life and how much goes into my work, and, that for something like that to be at the forefront was like a travesty to them. So I just take everything in stride in the art world, because, making a name in art history is the most important thing that the artist has to concern themselves with.
Absolutely.
Something we've spoken about,
Yes.
and something I'll continue to do regardless of what's taking, the spotlight.
Well, apparently this particular event displayed one of the ugliest part of the modern art world. Once the name is there, there is absolutely no expectation to the artist as of to what they do. They virtually can do anything, and it will be received as something expected and something positive by the art world, just because they already have this name. They can get completely lazy, they completely can stop doing things, or do something preposterous as this notorious, I know how to describe it. It's like a mini fruit basket, I would imagine. That would be appropriate vernacular.
Yeah.
Yes, so that's one of the most trying things for the modern artist to understand, that yes, if you don't have the name, or your name is still in the making, or your name is not on the first pages of newspapers and of the news websites, apparently every step is a lot of labor, and sometimes unreasonable amount of labor.
Yes, this is true. And as an artist myself, I've said this before, I want to create art. That's what I want to do. That's what I'm put here for, to inspire people, to really move people. And unfortunately, until I land a big museum show, which I'll fight for till my death, and until I have the critics really speaking favorably about what I do, a big part of my role, as with every other artist, is to build a platform, to speak, as I'm doing here on the show, and to constantly put out there the word about why your work is special and why what you're doing matters.
Absolutely. Well, as our New Year's wish, we wish you to end 2020 with this show already being completed.
Thank you so much.
Hopefully that's exactly what would happen with you and every artist who deserves it.
Yeah.
Yes, apparently we do have a lot of artists who are working more than necessary on the image instead of working on the art. Apparently, in the end of 19th century, there was a profession invented called art critic.
Yeah.
And the job of that group of individuals, by definition, is actually to take this burden away from the artist. to actually be those people who schooled, educated, and prepared to understand art, and to help the artists whose work is of value and of essence to get where they want to be without burdening artists with doing it themselves. But apparently the tables turned in a very weird way, and right now in many ways profession of the art critic becomes to be an obstacle. You mentioned several prominent people from this field calling you being outraged by the situation, and they are rather exceptions, because no matter how much of the outcry there was on a general public level and on level of collectors, and I don't have to mention on level of artistic and creative world, the art critics received it rather calmly, if not favorably.
Wow, interesting.
Basically, the general idea in this situation that we can't judge what is art and what is not, and that I do believe is in a way excessive. If there is no way to judge what is art, then there is no art. It doesn't exist. How you can tell what is an art piece from what is not, besides the actual aesthetic perception of it and having some logical reasons to call something art.
Yes. Speaking of which, it's funny because I just saw a special or a show about the Apollo Theater, speaking of judging art. And they started with amateur night, which everyone that knows the Apollo knows is when, you know, the talent comes on stage and it's the audience. It's not the critics, it's not the management, it's no one other than the people there to see the show who either boo you off the stage or applaud you because they like what they see. And you know, this is what it started with, which I kind of liked, because as an artist, I continue to bring my art and my message to the public. I'm going to read my artist statement here, which is newly revised, to give a real idea of who I am as an artist and what I'm trying to speak out about. But it segued, the show did, and it went right into the plight of African Americans and their struggle, which I appreciated, because all people, like in this country, all people from everywhere have the same problem in standing up for their rights and their freedom. I mean, all people from Italians to Germans to Jews to American Indians to people from India to Chinese to you name the group of people, they've somewhere in the course of history, because this goes back to the beginning of time, have had to stand up and speak out for their freedom. The artist, while perhaps it's not as egregious as what I'm proclaiming about human rights for people, still as a profession is one where they have to fight for respect. I mean, where have you heard the term starving artist attached to any other profession? Have you heard like starving waitress or waiter, starving janitor, starving plumber? I mean, you don't hear that term, and that term implies a worthlessness, which I have to speak out against. And my artist statement, while it clarifies why I believe my work is special, in no way is over the top or is inflamed with an artist myself speaking boldly about himself with a narcissistic edge. It's not about any of that.
Absolutely.
It's about why I feel my place is here and why perhaps it's deserved in art history and hopefully will be seen as such.
Yeah, that you actually raised an extremely interesting subject. Profession of visual artist up until mid-18th century and in many places even later was profession of a servant, like glorified servant essentially. You would have a patron who would pay you what they believe your art worth, sometimes pretty substantial sum, but most of the time something modest enough to feed your family, but not more than that, even for the most talented people. But you was treated like a servant, you was respected only on the level of educated, valuable servant, and that's it. And I do believe in a way in our society this notion remained. It's not only that people talking about starving artist existence. A lot of people, if you would notice it, would actually imply discussing this. That's how the things should be. That artists, in order to create, have to be starving. That
Wow.
it's actually a necessity for the artist, and not to go even just into European culture. In Japanese culture, artists was actually part of the class system that would live in their own villages, that would be essentially Japanese equivalent of pariahs.
Wow.
And
crazy.
in India as well, it would be in a very similar fashion assigned to the lower caste as well. Creative professions in most parts of the world, except probably for the ancient Greece and Rome, was considered to be that. And I don't see the reason why in our modern, refined and educated world, where essentially everything depends on art, we still, in a way, succumbing to this notion. If you think about it, everything we enjoy in this world, one way or another, is related to visual art, from marketing
I agree.
to entertainment.
Absolutely.
Yes, indeed, we definitely deserve more respect and better understanding of what is done by visual artists and art in general, and how it have to be implemented for everybody's benefit. We'll get back to this break. Single trick by single shot. Today I want to tell you about the least quantifiable quantity of the lens. I will be talking a lot about it, and that would be the lens character. It's a combination of lens optics, the way they made, the way they coded, its properties based on its focal length and everything else, which makes every lens to have a unique way it interprets the image. In order to show you the difference, I brought 3 lenses that all the same focal length, 135 millimeters, made for the same kind of camera, and at the same time period. They're made by Leica, Zeiss and Schneider. So I will just take a picture with all 3 of them, and you will be able to see the difference yourself. And that's pretty much what lens character is. Alright, we're back. So based on all we discussed in the first section, let's look on your new statement. I'm actually curious how it changed since the last time you wrote it.
Yeah, it's newly revised. It's about a week old. Every week for 40 years, that's 40, not 14, 40 years, I've been shooting 8x10 large format chrome film photography, over 10,000 chromes, trying to express myself outside of the system through Colavito 21 Fundamental Principles of Pure Photography, an art style the first of its kind. I've paid my dues heavily as an artist, which I understand means nothing unless the work is truly original. And in actuality, I've created nearly 300 artworks entirely separate from other artists before me. This work is shown in fine art image selections on my website. Please see Colavito 21 Fundamental Principles of Pure Photography, confirming my authentic art style separate from the masters of photography in art history. I only use my own art in my 8x10 compositions, including my oil paintings, hand-painted objects, bronze and clay sculptures, linear designs in line form, modern design, functional art and panels, sketches, geometric designs and links, etc. And I create compositions using architectural fragmentations as well. Please also see my television broadcast interviews explaining my art style, as well as Colavito cinematic art films and a documentary by Bobby Sheehan, Michael Colavito, Cubist Illusionism, where I make a statement defining the backbone of who I am as an artist. Creating original art is a matter of life and death to me. Now, that's the statement, and I want to validate this and qualify this in a sense. When I speak about 300 artworks that I feel are truly profound, it's easy for anyone hearing that when you speak about yourself as an artist to say, oh God, he's full of himself. But I want to erase that thought, because when I say 10,000 chromes, first off, I've probably shot about 50,000 chromes in my life when we take into consideration medium format, 4x5, 6x7, 6x8, 6x9, 35 millimeter. But 10,000 times for 8x10, and I did a count recently. I was in my studio, I counted the boxes, and I marveled at it. I thought, wow, that really is an extreme amount of work.
Yes.
So 10,000 times I went into the darkroom and I loaded a holder. 10,000 times I created art, and my art is complex. It's no easy task to do the A10 that I do with all the elements I add. And don't get this wrong, out of the 10,000 times, all of it's at a pretty high level in my mind. I have to answer to myself. My exposures are dead on, I'm a professional. But to reach perfection, which is what I care about, I care about creating, quote, a masterpiece when I shoot. Whether or not I do that, again, is up to the public and to the art critics and the museums to decide. But in my mind, when I feel I've succeeded 300 times, I must point out that that means that 9,700 times I failed in my eyes. 9,700 times I was so severely disappointed because I, take this to heart. I want to create something that's going to really move and inspire the viewer. And if I feel I haven't done that to the extreme, it's extremely disappointing. So you do the percentage, we're talking 3% of the time, and if you take into consideration the 50,000 chromes I've shot, we're talking that less than 1% of the time when I go out there and put my heart into what I do as an artist, I have been disappointed. So I have to say that and put that out there, because it's not about narcissism when I feel that I've done something special, and I hope that people listening and the world will go to my website and judge for themselves, as in the Apollo Theater in New York City and Harlem, they do for talent that comes on stage, where people can say, this guy is full of himself, or in fact, wait a second, this guy, let me take a step back, has something here that's valid, that in fact is unique and separate from other artists before him.
That's actually an epically well-written statement, which will be good for the whole art movement.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
When I was reading about it, the magnitude of what he was discussing was actually reminding me of Bauhaus' approach to art.
Oh, wow.
In many ways.
It's a
And
compliment.
I can say as an artist that there is no feeling to match that when you actually look at the work and saying, that's it, that's exactly what all this labor was leading to. And it's one of the things that a lot of people who are not creating themselves something artistic don't realize, that what they see is not just one photograph, it's not just one painting, it's not just one art piece. It's a frozen moment in a very long process in which a responsible artist discards about basically a bulk of what is created as something they don't believe deserves to be associated with their art. And that's one of the reasons why all this starving artists situation exists, because responsible artists who actually create something substantial can't allow himself to use what he is himself or herself is not completely satisfied with. And that leads us to actually a very interesting point, that up until recently, every art piece that would be considered to be a masterpiece in one way or another would go through the whole set of filters. And that would be as follows. First, the very first filter would be the artist's training. For anything up until modern art, even contemporary art, because in modern art even that wasn't possible, it was virtually impossible to create a piece of art without being trained and schooled in art. Even Picasso had his
Interesting.
formal training, and even Picasso created these works that for a lot of people seems to be very plain and obvious, probably because they're so genius, based on a very long and profound process of understanding what the artist was doing before him. By now, for a lot of people, this process is obsolete. The second point is this internal filter, which would make every responsible artist to look at his work or her work and say, this I consider art, this I don't consider art. Right now, there is a huge group of people who excel or not that much excel in creative professions, who are ready to release just about everything that comes out from their hands and let everybody else to deal with it. And that actually creates what I call white noise. A lot of the
Yeah.
works that wasn't even curated by the artists themselves. They just let them out because it's so easy. You made something, you put it on Facebook. You
Yeah.
don't have to think. Nothing bad will happen from you putting it. People most of the time polite enough not to share with you their negative opinion. So that creates a massive amount of art pieces that even artists probably not approve that much of. So the next filter was mentioned above, art critics. And their job was actually to judge what is happening based on their training, their education, and hopefully their personal taste.
Sure.
And there is one more filter which I would quickly mention. That was actually public opinion. And most of the artists don't have the access to it because there are less viewers than we need for the amount of artists we have.
Yeah.
So we will get back to this after the break. Today in Single Shot, I'm going to tell you how to make a makeshift pinhole camera. It's actually very simple. All you need is a business card. I'm gonna use mine, but you can use any. You need to apply 2 pieces of duct tape on it, just like this, so they will be overlapping each other. And right in the middle of the cut, from the inside, pierce a small hole. The smaller and rounder it is, the better will be your result. And put this contraption right on the camera, so the hole is right in the middle of the lens space. Then point it at what you would like to take a picture of, put the camera on delay, and take the shot. Voila! You have your pinhole camera shot. Thank you and watch us on YouTube. Alright, we're back. So, as I was saying, we had those 4 filters, and apparently every single one of them right now in one way or another malfunctioning. And just like it happens with a Cayenne air conditioner, it's probably time to have them replaced.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think just in a broad sense that the discrimination has to stop. I mean, everywhere in life. I mean, if it would be in a perfect world, people would be respected, you know, all peoples would be seen the same. There'd be no, you know, standout differences. And with the artist, you know, just for him to be able to have a fair shot at,
Fair shot, exactly.
you know, at presenting himself in his work where it's just about the work. And you had mentioned somewhere earlier about minimum wage, and people really care about minimum wage, because workers should get paid what they're, due, and they shouldn't have to enslave themselves in any profession. And I think artists should also be able to make a good living from what they do if they're in fact good artists and if they're really dedicated. And when I speak about myself, I've dedicated every moment of my life to this. It's my day job through thick and thin, and it will always be. And it's not about the money. I didn't choose this because of money and success. I chose this because I want to create work that, again, matters, and I want to move people. And fortunately, I've done that in a big way. So I've really been successful beyond anything I can imagine. And I would like to get more, respect and success with museums presenting my work, because then great numbers and masses of people get to see it. So that's ultimately why it will be my goal forever, and why every artist has to focus on this and feel the same.
Yeah, and as you just said, essentially it all comes down to fair exposure and fair opportunity for every single artist. And in order to have that, we really need to see those 4 filters being in one way or another brought back to functioning.
Yes.
We need to see that the artists are not abusing their opportunity to show art without actually thinking themselves whether or not it needs to be shown. We really need to get the new generation of visual artists to actually see value in studying art and understanding what was before them, before they actually would create something. And we need to have people who have authority to judge it based on something making more sense than just posting a fruit on a wall with a duct tape. And we need to provide artists with the access to all these vast audiences that right now just dying of hunger without being fed with good spiritual food in form of art. So let's hope that our future will be doing exactly that. It's really about time. I really believe that this is exactly what will be happening soon.
Hopefully
Thank you, Michael.
2020 will be a turning point.
We'll see about that. Thank you, Michael. It
Thank
was
you.
a pleasure. Thank you.
I hope you found that worth watching as much as I did. I'm Mark for Roundtable. Thanks for watching. See you next week.